Hello, everyone. Good night. Hope you all have a good Saturday. Now, today we are talking about starting off a brand new planet tank, or if you are looking to get into the hobby, this is the stream for you. So, first off, we're going to talk about the equipment and some of the considerations that you should think about before you actually do get your planted tank, and then we're going to talk about some of the maintenance and the other considerations, keeping in mind that not everyone have has $1,000 to spend on this hobby. So let's get started. The first thing that I think everyone who is looking to get into the planted tank hobby should consider is, where are you going to put this tank? Because that's going to help us decide some of the equipment, some of the stuff that we're going to add to this tank. Okay, so for example, are you going to make this the centerpiece of your house? Now, if you are making the centerpiece, you might want to go for something a little larger, right? Or do you want this to put on your nightstand? Because if you are just using it for a white noise machine, probably a smaller tank is going to be easier for you in both terms of cost as well as all the other things associated with it, right? Water changes and the plants that you want to grow in there. Okay, so I think people think about planted tanks the same way that they think about fish tanks, and it's that we want to have the best everything, um, and to me that's just, like, there's a lot of people out there telling you you've got to do this, you've got to get the ADA, you've got to do all of that stuff, but you don't. The joy to me of actually doing planted tanks is to see your plants grow and to foster this environment where they can thrive and look very, very beautiful. Because if you've ever gotten into planted tanks, you know that depending on the situation and the environment that you put your plants in, they can look very, very different. Just one species can have very different looks. Okay, so decide where you want to go. The second thing is to figure out your budget. There's nothing wrong with wanting to do a lot of things with a small budget. You just got to look at different places, right? Now, one of the things that I want to caution you against is to just go to your local store and just tell the clerk, hey, you want to plant a tank, and have them recommend everything. Because a lot of times they're recommending things in the store. And if they're recommending things in the store, you've got to go and order or buy all of the things that they have in the store, and you're sort of confined by those choices. So, what I recommend you do is to think and plan before you get things. This is not an afternoon thing, okay? This is like a month or at least a week of planning before you actually start. So first figure out your budget, start planning, and then when you have a good idea of the things that you want in your tank, that's when you go to the store, look and see what they have, see if there's other things that you want, or things that catch your eye, and then remember what they are. You can take a picture, come home, do more research on them. Do not, I repeat, do not just go to the store and buy everything on the first day. That's probably the worst way you could do something as important as and as big of a commitment as a planet tank. So let's start talking about the specifics and stop with the sort of generic stuff. The first thing that you want to look at, okay, is your tank size. All right. For me, I started off with a 10-gallon, and I think that was the perfect size for me, just because I wasn't really sure of what I was doing. A 10-gallon is going to be great for a room. It's going to be great on a rack with other types of fish tanks, and it's going to be a really nice sort of kitchen or countertop thing that you can do, right? So 10-gallon for me was the best. You can also look at 20 gallons. Now, 20 gallons in the US, there are two very, very common sizes, the 20-gallon long and the 20-gallon high. There are goods and bads to both. The 20-gallon long means that you need a weaker light to be as bright as the one on the $20 or 20-gallon high. And that's because, the depth of the water affects the how bright your light actually is. So for me, if I was doing things on a budget and I wanted to buy a light that was very, very cheap, but it could also be very, very bright, I would choose a 20-gallon long. Now, the bad thing about having a 20-gallon long is if you want to grow these tall plants, or if you want to keep things like angelfish or these taller, flatter fishes, the 20-gallon long isn't going to look the best, and you're going to have problems with stem plants trying to grow tall and then ultimately just doubling over, because the plants will grow like this, and then once they reach the surface they don't have the strength to pull or to push out of the surface, so they'll just double over and you're going to have to trim over and over again, especially if you have CO2, which we'll get to in a second. So for me, the biggest size is somewhere around 10 gallons to maybe 30, 20, or 20 if you can, and pushing 30. That's probably your best starter. Now, if you're doing a big centerpiece, right, you're going to look at the 55s, the 75s, and just know that no matter what kind of light you get, what kind of substrate, what kind of decorations, a 75 will cost you more than a 10-gallon, of course, right? So the tank size is important. Now, what about the tank type? Well, a lot of times people see a bunch of videos on YouTube and they're like, I've got to get this rimless, low iron glass tank. Well, you don't have to do that. The problem with this is, yes, low iron glass looks amazing, and rimless tanks, awesome looking, but you have to like watch out for a lot more things. Number one is going to be, how are you handling this tank? You cannot grab the tank and just put it onto the sides like that. The biggest thing is you need this little flat surface on the bottom and to support it with some type of foam or some type of yoga mat base, right? That's for any sort of rimless tank on the bottom. You've got to have that full support. So if you're trying to build a fish tank rack, you're going to have to fill the bottom. The second thing is they're a lot more expensive. So all of your UNS, your ADA, all those rimless tanks are so much more expensive than just a 10-gallon at Petco. One of the biggest things is, if you get into this hobby, you're going to know that there is a $1 per gallon sale at Petco. This is an American company, I think. I don't think they're anywhere else in the world, but if they are, you guys should let me know. But the dollar per gallon is essentially exactly what it is. So for $10, you can get a 10-gallon. For $20, you can get a 20-gallon. But recently, I think because of certain things that are going around in the world right now, their prices have gotten up. So nowadays, it's more like, I think everything past 20 gallons, so any of the 29s, etc., it's like another $5 more. So if you're like getting a 55-gallon tank, it's like $60 during the sale. Normally, it's almost like twice that price. So I would always wait until the Petco has that dollar per gallon sale to go get your tank. Okay, your tank can be one of the last things you get, and you can prepare everything else beforehand. Don't rush into it. It's the worst thing you can do in this hobby, is to rush into it without advice or research. Now, we've talked about the tank. We've talked about the general stuff. Let's talk about the next thing you should put. I'm gonna structure this just like as if you were setting up the tank. Okay, so we've got the tank. Now we need a stand. The stands, you can make it yourself, right? Go to Lowe's, go to Home Depot, get your own wood, cut it out. Now, if you don't have any of that tool, any of those tools, that's fine. A lot of times Lowe's will cut you the wood. Now you just got to make sure it's the right size. And if you want to do, like what I did was, I just got a very generic table and made sure that the weight is going to carry, like for me, it was a 10-gallon. I just sat on the table, and if it was stable, I used it. I have another TV stand, like, the old fashioned TVs with, that whole, like, the back of it is like pulled down. Now it's all like flat screen TVs, but back in the old days, it was like a big box that you would put on like a stand. And I just used one of those TV stands, right? And it worked. Another thing is if you go to Aquarium Co-op has this really nice video on how to make a whole row of fish tank racks based on just cinder blocks and I think 2x4s. The 2x4s and the cinder block method is going to help you do a lot of, especially if you're doing 20-gallon talls. Because I think with the way the measurements work, the 20-gallon longs or 20-gallon talls work out perfectly. All right, so talked about stand, and another way you can make the stand look good is if you actually use poster board or some type of vinyl and just put magnets on the side, okay? And then to hide that cinder block. And then just by using that cinder block, you make something look good, but it's kind of cheap, I'll be honest. I made a whole, I was able to do like a whole row of racks for maybe like 4 or 5 tanks. Probably just by getting a couple of 2x4s and some cinder blocks, which were like $1 or something each. So we've got the stand, we've got the tank. Let's move on into what's actually inside the tank. Okay, there are two camps out there in the fish keeping world. Number one is the people who are saying we need to have CO2, the highest lighting ever. We need to fertilize the fertilizing routine. We need to do RO water and all that like high tech stuff. That's what they call high tech. And then the low tech stuff, low tech people. These are the people that are like, you know, I can grow plants just as well. And the goal for me is just to grow plants. I don't really care if I have the most beautiful equipment ever. And I'm just going to grow it with dirt, sand, and plants and the like. The method that people always talk about is the Wallstead method. It was a book called I think the Art of a Planted Aquarium or something like that, written by Diana Wallstead. And she basically says, here you do a soil Miracle Grow potting mix or some type of potting soil base. You pour sand over it, so when you add the water, it doesn't like leach up into the sand or past the sand and into your water. And you just plant your plants in there. Okay. And then the Wallstead method is like you need CO2. You just do water changes, just turn on that light, and you just have a relatively low bio load. So you're going to see that a lot of times people put guppies or shrimps inside a Wallstead method tank. For me personally, I chose to add CO2 and do something in between. Okay. I took aspects of the high tech people party, like Green Aqua, people like that, who make all these showroom style tanks. And I also took aspects of the people who just like it simple, who like it cheap and simple DIY. Okay. Because for me, I knew that I wanted CO2 to grow a lot of plants. I knew I was going to grow them out, trim them, even package them and sell them to make some money back. So we're going to talk about CO2 in a moment. But for now, let's stick to the substrate. There are a lot of things that you can do. Fluval stratum, ADA Amazonia, there is UNS contrasoil. Contrasoil is like sort of in between stratum in terms of price and ADA. UNS contrasoil is one of those soils that aren't really remarkable in any way, but it's also not bad at all. So that's what I use. I use the extra fine UNS contrasoil. I think the black version. There's the brown and then the black, and you can get this online for about $50-$60 depending on how much shipping you pay. But the thing is, the UNS contrasoil and any other sort of clay-based substrate, a lot of times when you're like moving things in the tank, it smushes because it's basically mud and it's been dried and processed into little balls, and so the clay smushes. And what you're going to notice is if you drop any on the ground, it's going to just like you accidentally step on it and you try to wipe it away, it's just going to smush. In the beginning, I thought they were like really hard pellets, but they're not. They're these little like clay-based muddy little things. And one of the most notorious one is the Fluval stratum, because stratum tends to be a little bit cloudier than the other soils when you're setting it up, and it takes a little bit to get the mud to settle down. But all in all, any sort of clay-based substrate is pretty much going to do two things. Number one, it's going to buffer your water, usually a little bit around 6 to 7 ish, because that's where most of the fish like it. We're going to talk about buffering. Actually, let's do it right now. So buffering for your tank is kind of like this person that's grabbing, you know, both sides of your tank, both the low pH and also the high pH side. So if you do a water change and there's a little bit more acid in your water, okay, it's going to make it so that your pH swing doesn't go all the way down to the bottom. And then if that happens, your fish are going to get stressed out. They might die, especially if you're keeping sensitive fish. Same with the other side. And more Slack, thank you so much for the super chat. Love the Amano shrimp videos, man. Just throwing some support your way. Thank you so much for the super chat. And the other one is the second thing that clay-based soils do is they provide a very nutrient-rich substrate for your plants. Now, the goal of the clay-based substrate, as well as the planted tank Wallstead Method substrate or the planted potting soil, is the same thing, right? We want this place for our bacteria to grow, to process the nutrients, and also to turn those nutrients into nutrients that our plants can take up. However, if you are doing something like, I want my tank to be full of Anubias and Bucephalandra and Java Fern, you do not need that clay-based expensive substrate. And in fact, Anubias, Bucephalandra, Java Fern, all of these things are called epiphytes, and mosses. They're epiphytes. They do not get put into the soil. You're not even going to need soil. And in fact, they look a lot better on something called sand. Just, you know, white sand, light yellow sand, this tan color sand. They look really, really nice. So if you've got Cereus stone, sand, and a bunch of wood, that is the best thing that you can do for epiphyte plants. I've always wanted to do an epiphyte tank. Just a bunch of Anubias, a bunch of Buse, a bunch of Java moss. The problem is I'm too poor for Bucephalandra. I don't understand. Bucephalandra, they're really good looking, but they're also very, very expensive. So we're going to get to plants in a second, but for now, let's keep on talking about substrate. More Slack. I use either black silica blasting sand or pole filter sand, depending on the tank look I want. Then mix organic potting soil 50-50 with the given silica sand. Add a 2-inch layer cap with a 1-inch of pure silica sand, either black or white. Yeah, if you have black diamond blasting sand, I think maybe Lowe's sells that, or Tractor Supply. I know a lot of people like that blasting sand, and the black sand is really, really good with green plants. And a lot of your shrimps like to like walk around, and you can see them like do a little thing that shrimps like to do with their I don't know, claws, pincers, walking legs, and they look really nice just like cleaning out the tank. Yeah, so more Slack says Tractor Supply out by me, but you have to rinse it really well. A lot of the sand substrate, you have to rinse really, really well. Otherwise, it'll just be clay, because a lot of times the sand comes mixed with the clay. The pool filter sand, I know for a fact that my Lowe's sells it, or Home Depot, and those are one of the cheapest things. If you've got a big tank and you want that really grown in looking feel, the sand cap plus the organic potting mix substrate is probably one of the cheapest ways and the most effective ways for doing that. The only thing with sand plus organic soil is that you're not really going to want to tear it down and reuse it. You can reuse the clay-based substrates. It's kind of hard to separate the sand and the soil together, but it's cheap. You can just do it again, right? Home Depot is cheaper than Lowe's. for pool filter sand. Okay, all right. For me personally, I think that after using both sand and the clay-based substrate, it really depends. I would probably have a preference for sand and the soil on the bottom, just a little cheaper for me, and you can set up a lot of tanks that way. Um, the great thing about the clay based is it's a lot easier to work with when you're tearing things down and you want to like pour it back in, right? You could reuse it. The only thing is like all the mold and all the detritus and the things settle into the clay, and so you might as well be using the the sand plus potting soil anyways, because you're gonna have to rinse that out. A lot of people think that, oh, I've got the clay based substrate, do I still need root tabs? And the answer I'm going to say is no. You do not need root tabs for clay based substrate. At least here's the at least. But if you are doing this for a long time, so more than a year or so, root tabs, you're gonna have to put something in there, right? I have a video on how to make a DIY fertilizer where you actually use a syringe and a solution of fertilizer, so like liquid fertilizer, and you just push the syringe all the way down and you squeeze and you just make sure that you don't disturb the substrate, or if you don't have fish that disturb the substrate. That works pretty much the same way as a root tab, except in liquid form. You don't have to really spend money on that root tab. But of course, you know, the root tab's not that expensive in the long run. The second thing I guess we can talk about now is hardscape, wood and rock. So if you actually, if you want to use like clay-based substrate and you also want to use sand, just know that after a while, okay, the sand and the substrate, any two types of substrates with different densities, they're going to mix together. They're going to mix, okay? And you're going to get like some of the clay-based substrate or some of the potting soil going into the sand, and you're going to have to like siphon out, suction out the ones that are left. And then you're going to add more sand. So people don't tell you that. When you're maintaining a sand plus another type of substrate aquarium, you're going to want to add more sand, okay? That is the key to making your sand path stay a sand path and not just get, you know, like completely avalanched out by the other clay base. Of course, you can add rocks that stop it from going other places, but after a while, with the fish swimming around, the current and the plants and everything, it's going to mix. That's just the way it is. It doesn't have to be the end of the world though. Just put in more, a little bit more sand. Hello, Benny's Aquatics. Thank you for coming on the stream today. Thank you for tuning in. So let's talk about hardscape. My favorite hardscape in the world, okay, just like fish for thought, is dragonstone. It is the coolest stone I have ever seen. They're like, this is clay that's been hardened, and it just looks so cool. It just looks so cool. It's got so many different variations out there. You've got the gray ones, the tan, the orange, the red ones. They're just so, it's just so cool. And because dragonstones got that like sort of verticality to it, like those little, the holes aren't like circular, right? I wish I had a piece of dragonstone just laying around. It's all in the other room, in my fish room. But the vertical elements of those bubbles that you see, okay, you've got lines that can lead the eye anywhere into the aquarium, right? You put them together like this, and basically you've just made yourself like a summit, right? The eyes are going to go here. Put them away from each other, and your eyes are going to be like, okay, what's on this side? What's on that side? So there are a couple different arrangements. You can overlap them like this. You can put them together. You can put them all onto one side. You can put them, you know, one after the other, like this. And it just points your eyes everywhere in the tank. It's awesome. It costs a lot to buy for me though. Shipping is expensive. Yeah, like any of the aquascaping rocks, Sirius stone, elephant skin, all that stuff, and wood. Like I can't believe driftwood is that expensive in the U.S. Look, I'm from Taiwan, and Taiwan is one of those is like one of those countries where aquariums and aquascaping and everything is like very, very popular. And the standard of living there, or the cost of living there, is lower than the US. And so I'm used to like very cheap aquascaping materials. And when I come here, I'm like, oh my God, my wallet is hurting so badly just looking at the price at things. The cheapest place I found is this website called SR Aquaristic. And that's where I got, they have like 44 pounds of dragonstone for like $100. And you know, it used to be free shipping. I'm not sure if they have that still, but there was also like a coupon code that you can put in, RW20, I think, and it would do like a 20% off. Let's see if this still works. So SR Aquaristic. I'm going to paste site down below or down in the chat. So you know, I'm not sponsored. I just like this site. I feel like the people here are doing good things, and so I'm going to talk about them. And they also have this like what you see is what you get section where they actually take pictures of everything, and they're like, this is the rock that we're going to send you. Okay, that's temporarily sold out, so I can't even put stuff into my cart. That's sad. Okay, let's just try something else. View cart. Hold on, give me 1 second. Let me make sure. Oh, they don't have the discount anymore. Very sad, very sad. Okay, but hey, at least they have free shipping. So it's $100 for 44 pounds of stone. And they also have the 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 they have like these aquascaping kits where they're like, here's like 3 or 4 different size rocks, and the cool thing about SR Aquaristic is if you actually like call them or you send them an email and you let them know or when you're checking out, you let them know that this is what I want. This is the look I want. They'll select the rocks for you. And if you provide them with your number, they will actually text you and show you a picture of the rocks that they're going to send you before they do it. So it's really good customer service, at least for me. And like I said, you know, every time I've bought with them, it's been a good experience. And I think I got their CO2 regulator too on with that site. So check them out if you've never seen them ever. And even with the way shipping is, they're still cheaper than my fish stores near me. And you know, I was on Reddit a couple of days ago, and I saw someone say that Lowe's online was selling Dragonstone. Now, if that is true, Lowe's selling Dragonstone, I'm about to get myself a hut filled with Dragonstone. It is my favorite rock. The only thing is, people always complain about having to like wash the aquascaping stones. Okay. For me, that's part of the fun. Yeah, I love Dragonstone so much. I'll take my toothbrush, I'll take that garden hose, and I'll just squirt it through, or I'll just like pressure wash my rocks, and I'll just have like 15 minutes outside doing this with the hose, you know, on the rocks. It's so fun. I love Dragonstone so much. And the coolest thing is, if you want smaller pieces, all you got to do is take a hammer to it, boom, you got smaller pieces. Now, okay, let's talk about another rock. Sirius stone. It makes your water harder. It leaches some minerals into the water. So if you've got tetras that you're trying to breed, or if you've got very sensitive fish and you need soft water, Sirius stone is going to make it harder. Yeah, more slack. Yeah, so like, it looks like someone found Dragonstone on Lowe's.com. It's marketed under like landscaping rock or something. And I kind of want to do that. Lifeguard decorative rock. I wonder how much. I wonder if it's like cheaper though from Lowe's. But it looks like the post on Reddit was like, this is a lot of rocks. So if it is, well, that's probably a very good place to get these. Yeah, like if with massive stones, the great thing is you could always hit it and make it better look or make it smaller. With serious stone, though, if you take a hammer to serious stone, the problem is it breaks along the white veins in the serious stone. So it rarely breaks like the black part of the stone. And so what you're going to see is the serious stone actually turns a little ugly if you break it. Um, for at least for me, like because it'll separate on the white, and you're gonna get like white parts on both sides, kind of like if you were putting cream cheese on a bagel or sort of putting like butter or something on your toast. You've got that little white film on both sides. So at least for me, serious stone, I'd probably buy um, like a mixed size bag. Also, with serious stone, it's a lot more denser and a lot heavier than dragonstone. So if you are buying 44 pounds of dragonstone, you're going to get a lot of volume, a lot of more. It's going to look like a lot more rock than if you just bought 44 pounds of serious stone. Okay. So elephant skin stone, petrified wood. Petrified wood is really, really cool if you're trying to go for that like old foresty rundown mountain look. Okay. Yeah, so for the other three other people watching, looks like we found some dragonstone on Lowe's sold by I think Lifeguard or something, but I've never done it before. I've never ordered from them before, so who knows? Um, I'm just gonna put that out there. You could try it. I'm sure it'll be fine. You could probably return it to another Lowe's nearby. So rock. Now let's talk about wood. In Taiwan, wood is like $1 per piece. Can you imagine that? Like, just imagine $1 of driftwood per piece. Here, it's like 20, $30 per like medium sized piece. Okay. It's like okay, in Taiwan, like one that's like this big is $1. A medium size, it's probably like $5. Okay. And then for the bigger ones, I think it like there's a little bit of a curve that goes up. It's not a linear curve, so the bigger ones are going to be a little bit more expensive. But for me, spiderwood looks fine. I've always wanted to find the ones that people make little bonsai trees with. So there's like these DIY, well, I guess handmade DIY, not DIY, sorry, handmade bonsai wood, and they're little bonsai tree looking things, but they're like $100 each, $70 to $100. I've wanted it before, but after thinking about it, I'm like, I'll just make I'll make rock scapes. I like those better. With wood, it goes through a period of like like um it'll grow a lot of like biofilm on it. So if you don't have a like bristlenose pleco or something that'll eat the biofilm, it'll just grow for like 2 weeks or so before it just disappears by itself. So for me, wood, I have a video series on a 5 gallon low tech tank where I used these little pieces of driftwood together to make a forest. And I've always wanted a forest aquascape just with a bunch of driftwood, but I've never found a source for the driftwood that I was satisfied with. Um, I know SR Aquaristic sells driftwood. There's a lot of different sites out there that sells driftwood, but they've all been very, very expensive. And I just don't know if I want to do that, especially if, my goal is to do things on a budget. Um, but with driftwood, one of the best things that you can do with driftwood is you can attach epiphytes, right? Anubias mosses, stuff like that. With driftwood, it's just like just use a little dab of super glue. It's a great way of doing things. Forget about the twine tying it up and everything. Just dab some super glue, gel type super glue on it. It's so much faster, and it doesn't make a difference in the long run. Let's see. So the next thing that we have to talk about is the plant related things, right? Light and CO2 and the plants themselves. So I think what I'm going to do is, we really have to talk about lights in context with the plants. So let's talk about CO2 first. I will admit, I am a proponent for CO2. I love being able to grow plants super fast. I like to grow them so that their leaves are huge, and the red plants will turn red, and I can, with CO2, I'm basically doing planted tanks on easy mode. Okay. Like, very popular plant, the dwarf baby tears. Do you say dwarf or dwarf? I'm pretty sure it's dwarf, but I also don't know how to pronounce dwarf. No one's ever told me how to do that. But the 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 dwarf baby tears is the coolest carpeting plant you'll ever see. It's actually a stem plant, just very small. So for me, with CO2, I can grow that plant on a Phoenix Stingray easy, easy. Okay. So for me, CO2 is something that I recommend to my friends. I think I got two of my friends into using CO2, and I'm very happy with that. And they are also very happy that they have CO2 now. Every time they'll send me pictures of their tank being super overgrown, and they're just like, CO2, right? And they're just like, I'm actually getting tired of trimming at this point. CO2 is very useful because CO2 is one of the main sources of nutrients that plants need. And if you are bubbling CO2 into the aquarium, you're basically giving your plants the main nutrient. It's not nitrogen, phosphate, or potassium. It's CO2 and light. Okay, CO2 and light is the main source of energy for the plants. And then if they have that, will they start taking in fertilizer? Okay. So here's my advice on CO2. Everyone has different ways of doing it. There's the DIY yeast sugar method. There's the paintball canister. There's the Fluval mini canisters. There's the big 10, 5, 10, 20-pound tanks with professional regulators and diffusers and everything. So for me, I started off pretty much investing all the money into CO2. That system has not failed me to this day, and I've been very happy with it. I used the regulator. I used a 10-pound tank plus regulator plus airline diffuser, check valve, all that stuff. I bought it brand new. If I could do it again, I would probably look for used. So where can I buy used CO2 regulators for fish? Well, if you've joined your local aquarium society, chances are people are giving or selling away CO2 equipment. A lot of people go from regular small size ones to like the yeast DIY to the paintball to then the big one, right? Just go ahead and make a post on Facebook or wherever other place that you need to communicate. A lot of people have extra stuff lying around in their basement. They would be more than willing to sell to you at a very cheap price. Just make sure that the regulator works and that the tank is not more than 5 years since the last inspection or 5 years old. Because I think every 5 years, now don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure it's every 5 years you need to get it recertified before you're able to refill the CO2 tank. For me, I use the SR Aquaristic. Again, I like the company, not sponsored. Do it if you want to. Don't buy it if you don't want to. I use this dual stage SR Aquaristic regulator, and a lot of the regulators, not just that company's regulator, have ways you can attach more bubble counters to it. Guys, bubble counters are useful for when you're setting it up. After a while, the water or the glycerin or whatever you put in there will evaporate. I've never refilled it. Okay, I'm lazy. You got me. I've never refilled my bubble counter before. I've never had to. Now, the only thing is if you have a white diffuser, okay, with glass diffuser, after a while, algae is going to grow on it and it's going to turn green, okay? And then what that's going to do is going to stuff the regulator, like the little tiny holes in the diffuser. And so what you're going to do is you're actually going to need to clean that algae for more CO2 to come out. So what I do is I'll disconnect the CO2. I will go ahead and disconnect, or if I can, disconnect the glass. So if you have like airline and a glass diffuser, do not try to pull that apart. It's not going to work. Number one, and number two, you run a really high risk of breaking the glass. Okay, I've done it before. Don't do it. It's like $20-$30 down the drain if you do. Okay, just leave it alone. You don't need to just disconnect any of that. Okay, just take that diffuser and just put a few drops of bleach on it. You can use a brush to brush the diffuser, but chances are it's not going to work. The algae is too tight in there. Okay, so put a few drops of bleach, let it mellow for 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever it takes to make sure the algae goes away. You can add a little bit more bleach if it's not working, and then use your toothbrush. Hopefully not the one that you use to brush your teeth with. Use a spare toothbrush. Use your friends, your brothers, your wife's, or whatever. Use that one, and then you brush the algae away. Okay, you got to kill it first before you brush it away. It's going to look very, very close to pure white. It's probably not going to get it to pure white. It's going to look very, very close though. And then put it in clean water. So take like a pot, clean water, and then I always, to make sure, I just pour a little bit of dechlorinator on there, and then I put it back into the tank. And as soon as you do that, you're going to realize that, oh my God, all the bubbles are coming back up, right? A lot of times you have clogged diffusers. That's probably one of the biggest reasons why bubbles are not coming out of your fish tank, especially if it's been running already. So CO2. Look, there are very, very different types of systems, especially like the Fluval one, the one that's like, sold at Petco or PetSmart. I've never used it because when I was looking it up, when I was doing research, I read a lot of horrible stories about it, but I've never used it. So I don't want to talk too much and diss that system. My friend started on that one. After a while, he was like, yo, the refills are getting very expensive. And we did the math, okay? Whether or not, like, after 1 year of operation, starting off with, a 10-pound tank, full regulator, full size, high-tech setup, compared to that Fluval thing and buying refills, we used 2 weeks, every 2 weeks. Like, sometimes it's longer, sometimes it's shorter, whatever. So 2 weeks of the Fluval kit versus the high-tech and high-end one. After 1 year, you've already like broken even. All right. And then the next year after that, chances are you're going to want to upgrade. Okay. So, before the first year. So in the end, you'll be spending a lot of money on the refills. And sometimes like the regulator doesn't work. He says it's kind of hard to turn around sometimes. I just started off with a high-tech one. I knew I liked this hobby enough to do so. And like I said, if I had to do it again, I would buy used, make sure it works. Probably would have saved a couple $100 there. Now let's talk about light. If you have high light but low CO2, you're going to grow a very, very large amount of algae. High light, no CO2 is probably a very bad combination. So don't think that you can, first increase the light and make up for it, make up for the low CO2. It doesn't work that way. You need highlight and CO2 to grow a lot of plants. But what you can do is take both. If you don't have CO2, you can take that light and go lower with the light. Milder light and mild or to no CO2 injection works. Okay, especially if you're just doing Anubias, if you're doing moss, there you can make a very good aquascape by just using low CO2, low maintenance, easy plants. Okay, you don't have to do a huge, amazing ADA style tank. Now, if you want to do an ADA style tank, you're probably going to need CO2. Anyways, for lights, Corey from Aquarium Co-op likes the Phoenix Stingray. I bought this Phoenix Stingray light and I love it. It's worked for the whole time that I was in this hobby, more than a year now. I've dunked it. I've definitely dropped it into my tank. Waterproof, didn't have a problem with it. The Phoenix Stingray Original has the ratio of red and blues and whites in a way that it makes all your colors look so much better, especially if you have fish like cardinal tetras or the German blue ram, where you've got like the blues and the reds in the same fish. That light makes your fish glow. It's so good. But the Phoenix Stingray 2 on Amazon, it's a little more expensive. Corey from Aquarium Co-op doesn't even sell it. Phoenix Stingray 2 has given me nothing but problems. Phoenix Stingray 2 is very bright, and look, I'll be honest. I put it on a 20-gallon long, the Phoenix Stingray 2, versus my Phoenix Stingray on the 10-gallon. They're the same height, okay? But the 20-gallon long is growing a lot of algae compared to the 10-gallon. And that, to me, is not a good thing. I have CO2 in both tanks. Same substrate, same water, same type, everything. Hopefully, I know it's two different tanks, can't really compare, but if you want, Phoenix Stingray is the original one. Don't get this Phoenix Stingray 2. There's no need. Now, and plus, there's a lot of white on the Phoenix Stingray 2, and the way I guess the light works just doesn't make things look as good. For me, another good brand is the Nicrew lights. The Nicrew lights, I was given 2 Nicrew lights for free by a friend who was getting out of the hobby. I've used them to grow all sorts of things, from phytoplankton to plants to mosses to phytoplankton. Dude, like 16 hours to 18 hours a day on a timer. Phytoplankton is done in a week or less, like 5 to 7 days. That's a lot. Okay. And granted, I put the light right next to the phytoplankton, but the Nicrew lights, they're cheap, but they're good. Like do not think, oh, it's super cheap compared to all the other ones. I'm not going to get the Nicrew. Nicrew lights are like the workhorses of the aquarium hobby. Okay. With more of the expensive ones, right? The Fluval 3.0s, the current USAs, I'll be honest, I've never bought them before. I've never needed to. I've got CO2. You guys see my tanks. They're very, very beautiful tanks, at least to me. And I've never needed to buy a light more than $50 for it. And the reason why is because, number one, I have low tanks, 10 gallons, 20-gallon longs. And number two, I have CO2. CO2 does the heavy lifting when it comes to planted tanks. And the way it works is when you don't have CO2, your plants are growing kind of like this, okay? And then as soon as you have CO2, it shoots up, okay? But then after a while, it shoots up. But after a while, it kind of plateaus. So you can't just keep adding CO2, because what happens is plants have a limit, right? You give them a lot of CO2, they sense the CO2, and they're like, we can make more, we can grow faster. But after a while, a plant is a plant. It's not like a god tier plant. It's not going to keep growing, and you're not going to get like 2 feet a day for any plant out there. unless you're like growing something mutated. So you don't need a lot of CO2. You don't need super high light. Same story with the light, but you need a little bit of CO2 if you can. And if you don't, then bring the light level down. You're going to think yourself, you're not going to get as much algae. Your plants are going to grow slower without CO2 anyways, but you cannot substitute CO2 with more light. That is not the way nature works. So for the remaining, I guess, 10 minutes of the live stream, let's talk about plants. I'm going to go through the ones I have, and I'm going to give you a little bit on each of them. So let's start with foreground, moving into mid, and then, background plants. The first one that I want to talk about is hairgrass. It was the first plant that I looked at, first plant that I fell in love with, and it is still one of my favorite plants. Hairgrass just looks really cool. There are two varieties, probably more than that, but two very common varieties, Eliocharis acicularis and Eliocharis parvula. The acicularis is a little smaller than the parvula, and if you go to PetSmart and you buy the parvula version, their supply, or that version, what you're going to see is, even with a lot of CO2, a lot of nutrients, their runners are actually at the tips of the plants. And so you're going to get all these like ugly little runners and roots coming up. So don't get the don't get the parvula version. Get the acicularis. They're a little smaller and the runners are down below. Okay. Another very similar plant to the hairgrass is the chainsword, like the micro chainsword. I'm not really sure what the scientific name is. Let me look that up. It's like, it starts with an L somewhere. Oh, okay, I found it. I'm going to go ahead and copy it and put it into the stream. That is another very similar plant to the dwarf hairgrass. The hairgrass is a little thinner, and the way it spreads is a little different because the chainsword is basically a chain on the bottom under your substrate, and it'll have leaves going up. Okay, that's why it's called a chain sword, right? It'll look like this if you have one chain, and then it'll have leaves coming up. Those things, any sort of carpet, unless you're talking about moss or very slow growing Monte Carlo, is going to need CO2. Okay. To get around that, you can use sand. Just don't get that green carpet. Just use sand as your carpet. You can grow sand in any kind of light, any kind of CO2. You don't even have to fertilize, right? So my two favorite ones, probably hairgrass, and earlier I talked about dwarf hairgrass or dwarf baby tears. Look, you need CO2 for baby tears. Don't let anyone else tell you otherwise. Don't spend the money on baby tears if you're not going to get CO2. It's going to be a fail. I tried, it didn't work. A lot of people online have said it doesn't work for them. A very similar plant is the Monte Carlo. Monte Carlo with CO2 grows slower than the baby tears in my water, and it can survive without CO2, but it grows to the point where you don't even see it grow. It's very, very slow. And you're going to see a trend of a lot of plants doing that. With CO2, they grow crazy. Without CO2, some are barely holding on, if not just growing very, very slow all the time. Another foreground plant is the S. repens. S. repens is another classic favorite of mine. It is probably easier to make a carpet of S. repens than a lot of the other ones. But of course, S. repens has bigger leaves. You can also grow S. repens immersed, so out of the water. With immersed S. repens, it actually starts growing hairs and it'll flower. It's pretty cool. So for me, what I always do is if I order plants in, I will put half of it into a high-tech CO2 tank, half of it I will try to grow in a low-tech CO2. After a while, or low-tech no CO2. After a while, I will take the high-tech CO2 plants and I'll try to grow them immersed, just so I know like the general characteristics of the species. What do they look like in high tech? What do they look like in low tech? What do they look like out of the water? And so that way I'm able to learn a lot more about a species before, I either cut it, trim it, give it away, or stop growing it. So let's talk about a little bit about mid-ground plants. Epiphytes, I'm going to include in this because a lot of mid-ground plants are epiphytes. Java fern, beautiful plant. If you see Java fern, it grows slow. Do not bury it into the ground. Like I said before earlier in the stream, just super glue it onto rock, wood, whatever you need. And a lot of times you can actually float Java fern. It'll block out some light, but it's going to survive. Same thing with Anubias, exact same thing. Anubias is one of those plants that everyone is looking for and everyone is willing to pay top dollar for. Anubias Nana is the cutest plant. Okay, look, I don't keep a lot of plants on my desk, but the one plant that I do have right here, let me see if the light will catch that, is the Anubias Nana is one of my favorite plants. And this plant can be broken up into little tiny baby pieces. And let me, kind of put some water on it with this. I'm going to put that. This plant, oh look, now it's like basically glowing. But this plant, you can break this plant up into little pieces, like half a centimeter. And I use a lot of metric because I don't feel like there's no reason for us to still be using imperial measuring systems. Metric is the way to go. The whole world is metric. Science is metric. Anyways, you can do like half a centimeter and just use a blade and cut it off, and it's going to grow. Like you're going to split up an entire batch of Anubias Nana that way. It's probably the fastest way to propagate Anubias Nana or any type of Anubias, just cutting them into little tiny pieces. And if you've seen I think the second part of my 5-gallon forest aquascape video, I show you how I do that. So the trick, guys, when you get Anubias, is to cut it up, and it's going to, you're gonna, Anubias grows slow anyway. So rather than getting one medium-sized piece that grows really slow, why not make it 3 small pieces that grow slow, but you're going to get 3 medium pieces in the same time that it takes your medium piece to go from medium to a little larger medium, right? So what kind of other mid-ground? Okay, cryptocorynes and AR minis. Cryptocorynes are, for me, they're very easy to take care of. I like them. If you put them in CO2, they send out a lot of babies of mother plants and little baby plants. They send out a lot of little baby plants, and they're very easy to break apart and replant. The only thing is they grow really long roots, so that if you're trying to replant, you're gonna have to pull out a lot of roots. And whether, if you're doing a sand cap and soil or if you're using clay-based, either way, you're gonna be pulling out a lot of substrate with it. The other thing is a lot of people have this thing called Crypt Melt, where if you plant crypts into another part of the aquarium, if you put them into a new aquarium, they'll just melt back and die, and then they'll come back. And I think that actually happens with a lot of plants, but crypts are notorious for it. But once you get past that, they're very, very hardy plants. Crypts, a lot of times your angelfish or your other cichlids will lay eggs on them because they've got that wide leaf. They're kind of like the smaller version of the Amazon sword. And there's a lot of different crypts out there. It's like Crypt parva is one of those foreground plants that you can plant. Very, very small. And then the ones I'm thinking of are the Crypt Wendtii. Cryptocorini Blend TI. Okay, I will go ahead and post the name, the scientific names into the chat so you guys know what I'm talking about. Oh, I forgot to capitalize cryptocorini. Cryptocorin. The thing with scientific names is you need to capitalize the genus, and then for the species name, you keep it lowercase. And if you can, italicize it. I don't know how to do that on YouTube, so we're going to go with that. With the other mid-crown plant that I was talking about, AR Mini, AR Mini grows very, very slow, even with CO2, at least compared to the other plants that I have in my tank. Of course, when we're talking about fast and slow growth and which ones make it with CO2 or not, it's in the context of my water parameters. There's always a chance that the reason why a plant is growing fast or slow for me is because of the tap water that I use to change my water with. Okay. So we can't just say plant X grows fast with CO2. We have to qualify that and say in my waters, with my nutrients, with my setup, with my light, at my part of the tank. My ram fry are taking baby brine shrimp now, Benny's Aquatics. They are very, very, very small still, but whenever I feed the baby brine shrimp, I see it in their bellies. And so I know that as long as I keep my baby brine shrimp hatchery going, okay, my baby fish are going to be fine. I think my female is my female's really fat now, and I think they're about to have another clutch of eggs. I'm hoping, I'm praying that this time the eggs are going to be all fertilized, or at least the majority are going to be fertilized, so that I can have more fry. Because I think from my first German blue ram video, if you've already seen that, I think you have, but I didn't get a lot of eggs that were fertile. So this time I'm really hoping that they do the deed correctly, because right now I probably have around maybe 8 to 10 total that hatched out and survived the wiggler stage. So, they're zooming about in a little cup. I do water changes every day with the siphon with the turkey baster, but they're doing fine. They're taking baby brine shrimp now. I'm very, very, very pleased. And my male, the father is looking really good, man. He's got the thing on the dorsal fin now. He's got that little black ray extension. The best way to tell if they're going to find you come just in front of the yeah, like that. You talk about that little clear thing. It's about like I don't know. It's like it looks like just a protrusion. Probably like 3 millimeters in length or in diameter. And she'll get really wide on the belly. And they'll start like pecking at the rock that they're going to spawn on. And if you see that happen, it's going to be like maybe within a day that they'll spawn. But they'll start pecking, and they'll start like kind of like calling that part of the tank their territory. It's pretty cool. Rams are awesome. I think their behavior is like interesting, and it's on par with something like a betta. Have you ever bred bettas before? Which, maybe I'll do a live stream in the future talking about my betta breeding. But there's a lot of betta breeders on YouTube, and they're probably all smarter than me when it comes to breeding bettas. But bettas are very interesting to breed. One of the first fish that I bred with my dad. So I got into the hobby because of my dad. He's really into fish too. Now that he's older, he doesn't really do that anymore. But I try to get him on my channel before, but he's like, I'm fine, I'm good. But just I was in elementary school, and my dad basically showed me the way, if you will. He instilled in me at a very young age that we were not very well off back then, but we had enough to enjoy life. And I think that way of thinking is what I want to like embody with my channel, because is, you know, you've noticed that my channel is all about education, it's about learning, and it's not about spending the most money to have the most high-tech show off tank. I have Betafry at the moment. The spawning process is amazing. Yeah, Benny, it's a great learning process. And I just, you know, I'm editing a brine shrimp hatching video right now. The way that editing for me works is because of excuse your excuse here. I'll mute myself so the mic doesn't. But because of the way this mic works, it it's not as good when I'm like just trying to use iMovie to do it. So I have to save all the videos and then go to Premiere Pro. But one of the coolest memories that I have with my dad is just coming home from school, and he had those like little tubs of like the plastic tubs for ice cream that you can get at the store, like at Walmart or something. It's like a huge tub of ice cream. It's like a no brand, but we would have that, and he would put water in there with salt. I think we used like rock salt or something. We didn't even use aquarium salt because my well, we didn't really have a lot of money, but um, we're better off now. So it's all in the past. But I remember he would like pour it onto his own sieve, and the way this is it sieve or sieve? I think it's sieve. But the way the sieve worked was it was a children's sort of like badminton racket, and it was a cloth, like part of a t-shirt, and we would like, and he sewed around the whole badminton thing, and we would use that as the sieve, and he would pour it in there, and we would just feed the entire thing to the Betafry. And it didn't matter if the eggshells went in, because I've seen the bettas like eat the eggshells and then be fine. So, of course, like that's my experience. It might be different for everyone. But for me, that was when I first started. And I was like, I don't need a lot of money. I could do this on a budget. I can have a very enjoyable process. Um, and, if you've got kids that are interested and you're watching this video, like by all means, involve them, show them the way. We need more young people to grow this hobby. Um, I have a lot of mentors now. They're all like they've been doing this for decades, and the central theme that they've told me about is like, look, back in those days, we had to figure out we had to figure out everything by ourselves, and if we wanted to research, we had to look at books. And the second thing is, you guys have a lot of gadgets now, but back in the day, all this stuff was doable without any of this. My koi angelfish are about to lay eggs for the 7th time in 3 weeks. Wow, that's a lot. Do you pull the eggs? Because like if they're taking care of the babies, would they lay more eggs if they are? Like I feel like my angelfish would like lay eggs and then eat them. Okay, they would lay eggs, but when they're more experienced, they would like raise them up. And actually, I think I had less problems with angelfish than I had with rams. It's a cool learning process. I forgot what I was talking about at the beginning of this. Oh, right, aquascaping. Yeah, we talk about plants. Um, but I'm gonna keep talking about cichlids because they're so cool. Um, the the German blue rams, man, they're so cool. I'm like geeking out just thinking about my fish. I would be in class and then I would be like, I wonder what my cardinal tetras are doing. And then I'd be like, I wish I could go see my cardinals right now. Um, my cardinals are fat, man. They're so pampered. All my fish are so pampered. My my thing is like I don't want to get a bunch of fish that I can't take care of. I just get as much as I can like love or take care of. and just watch, sitting in front. Like when I wake up, first thing I do after I go downstairs is just sit in front of my tank and just watch my fish swim around. It's so peaceful. It's a great way to wake up. And a lot of times you're going to notice like these fish end up like in the beginning they're all hiding because you just appear, and then later they start swimming out and you start seeing the things that you don't see normally, like the German blue rams are picking things from the earth, or the cardinals are chasing each other, and the rummy nose, the male, is trying to spawn with a female cardinal tetra. I need more female rummy nose tetras, I'll be honest. I have 2 males at the moment. No one else around me has rummy nose tetras that I can get. I would like more rummy nose tetras, but recently, my cardinals, I got albino cardinals, and those are the coolest. They're like pastel colored. The albino cardinal tetras are pretty cool. I'm still in quarantine stage. Got one with like a bit of like muscle issue, I think, or it's just like a white growth on its inside its body where the muscle of the back of the fish is. I don't really know whether or not it's like a virus or a bacteria or a parasite. So, we're treating with general cure, I think, and I think furin too. But you guys know me, when I'm dosing meds, I don't dose until I see an indication to dose, and that's probably good antibiotic stewardship, because we're running out of antibiotics. There's a lot of things out there that are resistant, so I don't want to be a part of that. But for now, there is an indication. If it doesn't work, I'm going to stop dosing, because it's most likely a virus at that point. Yeah. So one of the things is, when I feed brine shrimp to my tank with German blue rams, my Amazon swords have like little green hair algae on it, and the brine shrimp will get trapped in that. And so I'll see the German blue ram like pick through the brine shrimp, and it's like, that's such a cool behavior that people don't see normally. Um, and if you're ever trying to breed fish, and Benny's Aquatics, I'm sure you know this, but brine shrimp is one of the best foods to feed your baby fish. Like microworms, infusoria, all that stuff can't compare to brine shrimp. Brine shrimp is like, once you start feeding brine shrimp, your fish take off in growth, and they're really good conditioning food. I feed brine shrimp almost every day if I can, and on the days that I'm still doing the hatchery, I'll feed bloodworms. So once I get that video edited out, hopefully I'll be able to do it this weekend. I've got 3 exams next week, so hopefully we'll try to crank that out before or after my exams, by the latest. But let's go back. I guess let's talk about background plants. So for me, the background plants that are my favorite is three different plants. Number 1, Rotala wallichii. They're these, like, if you've got highlight, high CO2, it's pink. But if not, it's like a nice yellowish, light green color. And if you've got like medium light, it's much more yellowish with a red, blood red stem. It's really, really cool. It's a Rotala species. And then the second one that I like is the Bacapa Caroliniana. So Bacapa is like, it's kind of a fragile plant when you first get it into your tank. It's going to melt. It's going to look ugly. It's going to look gross. But as it bounces back, it's got thick leaves. It's got thick stems. And if you've got CO2, it's even bigger and thicker. And once it reaches the top, where it's very, very high light from your LED lights, it's gonna turn this like sort of bronzish color. It's really, really cool. And sometimes you can even get it to flower. It's really cool. So Bacapa, we've got the Rotala wallichii here. Why don't I just go ahead, Bacapa, Caroliniana. There we go. And then Leachii. Those are the two that I'm talking about. And then lastly, this is a low tech option. Okay. My third recommendation is the Amazon sword. Amazon sword, like you can run it through fire, you can pour bleach on it, it'll still survive. Okay, you probably can't do either of those things, but you guys get the point. Amazon swords are those really, really long or really, really large, wide leaf rosettes. It's called a rosette because the sort of the heart of the plant, if you will, is at the very bottom. Okay, and the thing about Amazon swords is if it's not getting enough light, if it's not getting enough nutrients, it's going to start consuming its own leaves. And lately, if you've seen some of my videos, you're going to see in the background of the videos that I have a couple Amazon swords that are in that process. And it's not because I don't have enough nutrients, it's because I rescued those Amazon swords from my gravel tank that I've stopped putting light on into that. So they're in the process of converting back into the high tech plants. Amazon swords you can grow in gravel. Okay, it's like rainbow colored gravel. You can grow those in gravel and they will survive on the fish poop that fall in between and get broken down by the bacteria. That's how OP and that's how resilient these Amazon swords are. When you split Amazon swords, one of the coolest things is people say that you can split them down the middle. Okay. The way I did it was I waited until number one, my Amazon sword like pushed off another baby sword on the side. But for me, like when I split that in half, one half survived, the other half didn't. But it wasn't a good experiment, in my opinion, because they were already in very suboptimal conditions. So the next time I get a big enough sword, I'm splitting it in half, planting them in my 20-gallon long. I'm going to make sure it works, and then I'm going to tell you guys. So you guys like don't listen to me, split your plant, and then have both die off, because right now I'm at a 50-50, right? Because one worked, one didn't. So Amazon swords, they're also really great uh, little spawning places for your angelfish. And now that I think Benny's also put another message in the chat. Well, I pulled the first batch, then let them try and raise, which they failed at. This time I'm going to pull them again. So I've got a friend that really, really wants to see cichlids raise their fry by themselves. But after letting my rams do that for like 2-3 times already, I would like to pull mine. I don't want to watch another batch get eaten. Maybe once I get more fry, I will do that. But for now, I want to raise them myself. I want fry. But for my angels, angelfish are like human parents. Some of them are good, some of them are bad. I've had a pair that's like the best parents ever. The angels raise their own babies. Like they're great parents. And I didn't run into that many problems compared to the rams. But I've also like I think when the cichlids are young, that's when they're like the most at risk of eating their babies. And also if you have other fish, and sometimes if you have like a pleco in the tank or a bristlenose at night when the rams or the angels aren't watching over their eggs, it'll get eaten. I have a video of my rams raising their fry. Well, there you have it, folks. If you guys want to see rams raising their babies, go to Benny's Aquatics. Yeah, this time, hopefully when my rams lay eggs again, I will pull it. We'll have more rams. But I'm trying to document the whole thing for you guys. But I don't think like right now where I am at, like they're still very small. There's a couple of them eating baby brines and like it's not enough for a video. So I think I'm gonna keep that footage, let it go for another month or so, and then come up with a second video. I'm starting my cardinals. I'm conditioning them. The females are fat. The males are still skinny. I don't think with any of the tetras, like I condition them the same way. Like I separate the males and the females. I condition them the same way, but for some reason, the males never get fat. The females always are the ones that swell up with eggs. And here's the problem with cardinals. There's not enough information out there. So what I'm doing now, it's 11:51. I might as well tell you what I'm doing, since the two viewers on right now, they're probably watching this right about time to fall asleep, at least in my time zone. So for me, I started collecting rainwater a long time ago. I've got a like probably 20 gallons of rainwater at this point. They I've everywhere I've read they need soft water, very, very soft water. And then I'm soaking that in peat moss. And I was going to, I think my last live stream, or the live stream before that, I was making this tetra breeding cage, right? And I finished it, I put it into the tank, and I put the cardinals in. And on the bottom, I had peat moss, and it was 100% pure rainwater. I covered the tank. I've got the heater and the bubbler running, and then they laid eggs. I saw the little white dots. The white dots, by the way, mean that they're not fertile eggs. But most of the time with tetras, you're going to get non-fertile eggs and also a lot of fertile eggs. And for a couple more days, the timeline was I put them in, I just left them alone. I didn't feed them. I didn't open up the tank. I just left them alone. And I think on day 3 or 4, I checked and they had eggs. Okay. After that, the babies hatched out. They were wigglers in the sand, or not sand, in the peat moss. And then all of a sudden, they just disappeared. All of them gone. And I was like, I wonder what happened. So this time, we're trying again. I'm going to make sure that the peat moss is there, but I also want to make sure that I recondition my cardinals. I think my cardinals are still young. I think they're not big enough, or they're not laying enough eggs or something. But the fact that there were wigglers and no free swimming fry tells me that something is wrong with the bottom of my tank, or there were free swimming fry, but they starved to death. So I'm going to be waiting until the infusoria grows a little bit more in my cultures, because it's still kind of cold where I'm at, and trying again. For now, I'm going to focus on the German blue rams. But it's really nice being like, okay, I've seen the cardinals breed. I've seen them do it. It's possible with my setup, but I haven't been able to replicate that. So we're still working out the problems. The thing is, with my cardinal setup, I had them in like a 10 gallon with a little bit of a Java moss. It's like a spawning medium. And I'm wondering if I remove that Java moss and just let them spawn over the grill or the mesh, whether or not that'll give me more eggs. And I'm still playing with the ratio of males and females, like how many. When it worked, it was a whole group of females and like 3 males. So like I think it was like 4 or 5 females and 3 males. But the problem with that is you don't know which female spawned. So it could have just been one, and the other fish were all eating the eggs. So for me, I'm going to probably do a little less fish. The only thing is, with less cardinals are like very finicky, scared, really on edge all the time. So if you don't have a big school, they don't feel safe enough to come out, and they don't feel safe enough. And I don't know if that'll affect the spawning. So guys, it is almost 12 o'clock. If you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. But I think we are going to end the stream at 11:57. 11:57. So 2 more minutes. Or 2 more minutes, wherever your time limit or your time is. one of the things is when I am ready with the quarantine for my albino cardinal tetras, I want to put them in with the regular cardinal tetras because the albinos, for some reason, are a little bit more bold. I don't know if it's just like my personal like opinion or if it's actually true, but hopefully the albino tetras are able to like embolden my regular cardinals, and then that way they'll come out. If you're looking for tetras that are dither fish, like very very bold fish, glow light tetras, the ones that are like clear with an orange stripe, those are very 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 cool. um, I have four of them in a tank, and they're just always at the front of my tank. They don't hide. Same with the German blue rams. Once they're like okay, or once they get settled to the tank, they're like, this is my territory. I don't care if anyone else comes along. And the only time that they'll hide is when they breed. All right, guys, it is 11:56. I'm going to see if anyone has questions. If not, I'm going to end the stream. And hopefully, I'll be able to stream probably next weekend. But I've got a lot this week coming up, and I don't want to like procrastinate by streaming, if you will. But I got to pass these exams. I got to do well. So thank you guys so much for this late night stream, hanging on with me. I am very very happy that you guys are all here. So I will see you next time, and just look out for that brine shrimp video. Have a good night, guys.